Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe me.
Help is on the way.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
Everybody knows he's a liar.
But you
I just
agree.
want to
Hey,
make sure.
Joe, you're the liar.
I want to make sure.
Graduated last in your class, not first in your class.
Less heat, more decorum than 4 years ago. That's the goal for tonight's debate, where the candidates will find their mics turned down when it's not their turn to speak, mostly to avoid moments like this.
The
Radical
question-
left.
Will you shut up, man?
Listen.
The debate is taking place in the battleground state of Georgia, which Trump won by 5 points in 2016, but famously lost by just 12,000 votes in 2020.
I have to find 12,000 votes.
When Trump lands in Atlanta today, he may encounter one of 5 billboards put up by the Democratic Party, highlighting his recent felony conviction. Biden aides say he plans to paint Trump tonight as too dangerous to return to the White House. He'll also argue Trump would cut taxes for the rich and further erode abortion rights. According to the new CBS News poll, most Democratic voters want Biden to strike a forceful tone tonight, while most Republican voters want Trump to be polite.
Donald Trump always talks about himself.
Former Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger formally endorsed Biden yesterday.
What do you think President Biden has to do in this debate?
I think just like, stylistically, who knows what Donald Trump's going to show up. Maybe it's, relaxed Donald Trump. Maybe it's crazy at the rally Donald Trump. But the messages couldn't be more distinct, which is he's about a grievance policy. Joe Biden's about helping people.
Trump aides are urging him to focus on crime, immigration, and the economy, issues they believe give him an edge.
I just want to hear both sides of the story.
Rocky Jones hosted the Trump campaign at his Atlanta barbershop yesterday and says he's still making up his mind.
More research. I mean, Trump is saying great things, and he's making a lot of sense. So, let's see what happens. It's just about who's helping you, who's making your business grow.
Tonight's debate will go for 90 minutes, and there will be no audience, which means no cheering, no jeering, no heckling. That all sucks up time. Instead, it'll just be the candidates and the moderators.
Okay, so about 2/3 of the country says they're going to watch this thing. We may have a shared moment, and of all the things that could happen tonight, that would be the best thing. That would be the thing that I would like, because, everybody is siloed. You know what that means? That means they're in their own little, silo. They're in their own little territory, their own little turf, getting their own media from their own algorithm that only feeds them what they seem to want to hear. And so you've got an entire country that is split into 100,854,522 different opinions about 3,897 facts, where only one of them is true. You can see the dilemma that we have, because people are getting information from algorithms feeding them what they want to hear, not what they need to hear. And there's a huge difference. What you want to hear and what you need to hear are not the same things. God knows. I have told you this. I've told you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear sometimes. And, people get very upset with me. Very upset because things are not the way that they want them to be. Well, I can't help you. Things are the way they are. They just are. That's called facts. That's called the earth is not flat. Okay. So anyway. Tonight is a huge debate. A huge debate. We'll have 2 commercial breaks. We could talk about all the other specifics, the mic turning off, everything else, and we can, talk to each other about what we think is going to happen tonight, personality-wise, policy-wise. I'll just tell you this right now. Donald Trump has no idea about anything. He doesn't know any policy at all, okay? None. He knows nothing. He knows absolutely nothing. He knows nothing about climate change. He knows nothing about meteorology. He knows nothing about economics. He knows how to cheat. That is the thing that he knows how to do, but that's about it. And Biden, he knows how to make things better for people. He knows that a child tax credit takes the number of people who live in poverty in this country and cuts it in half. Do you notice that he knows, how to get vaccines out the door? He knows how to organize, relief efforts. He knows a lot, and he knows, exactly how to put the middle class in charge of this economy versus the elite in charge of this economy. And they are two very stark different choices, and they are two different policies. Donald Trump doesn't know anything except, taking money from the elite and then cutting taxes. That is the extent of his presidential inspirational thing. I mean, he knows nothing. He's a great salesman. That's the only difference. But first we have to talk about the Supreme Court, because there is a thing that's going on in the Supreme Court that I think some people know and others don't. And, maybe there's some attention being paid now because the Supreme Court is throwing all these decisions out the door right now. These decisions are not really decided. That's the problem, okay? None of it has actually been an ironclad decision. None of it is take it to the bank. Here's the rules of the road. This is the way it is. You have your rights back or you don't. None of it. It's all been a ruse. It's all been a delay. This is all that's happened at the Supreme Court. It's been one delay after another delay after another delay. Even with regard to 20-year-old cases like the Purdue Pharma case, the Sackler family, okay? This is an amazing thing. In 2007, this is how ridiculously ill-prepared and badly run our justice system is, okay? It's a disaster. It's not that it's in the tank for this one or that one. It's just that you can use certain tools if you're very, very wealthy, and one of them is delay. And Donald Trump's a master at this. So are the Sacklers, okay? In 2007, I'm talking, the number of overdose deaths in this country from opioids was exponentially increasing, okay? And so the top executives at Purdue Pharma, there's a ton of movies, there's been miniseries, there's been Michael Keaton, had a great role in a series about, a poor, being a country doctor prescribing opioids, being told by Purdue Pharma and the Sackler family that, Oxy wasn't addictive. And the little the paper that goes inside your prescription, was actually claiming that oxycodone was less addicting than every other, pain management pill that was on the market, and that you should prescribe it because it runs much less of a risk of addiction. Oh my God, it was the most addicting substance in the history of the world. That's number one. Number two. The executives in 2007 pled guilty to federal criminal charges, and the company was fined back then $600 million for misleading doctors, for misleading regulators, and for misleading patients about the addictive quality and the nature and the potential for abuse. Okay, and so the first opioid lawsuits were settled against Purdue around 2014, 7 years later. 7 years later, that's how long this crap takes. And then there was a flood of litigation, and there was intensifying scrutiny on the members of the Sackler family because they had a vast fortune that they made off of this and lying about it. In 2019, this is how long this has been going on, Purdue filed for bankruptcy, okay? Bankruptcy restructuring. And that paused all the lawsuits. Delay. It paused all the lawsuits. And at the time, the Sacklers faced about 400 related claims. 400 related claims. And so the move to file for bankruptcy was seen as sort of fraudulent to begin with. It was seen as contentious, let's just say, from the start. A bankruptcy judge approved a deal in 2021. The deal said Purdue Pharma would be dissolved. The company would give billions of dollars to the opioid crisis in trying to solve it, and it would put an end to thousands of the related claims. And the Sacklers themselves would be guaranteed protection from civil liability going forward in the future. The amount that they agreed to pay was $6 billion. This case came before the Supreme Court and this session, and they decided it today. It's really kind of fascinating.
A things Randy at RandyRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
Kellyanne, where are those ads? Because, you know, if you do it properly, and we've had some great ones, great ads, young people looking at these ads, they won't start. I think in many ways, you don't see the result for 4 or 5 years, but in many ways, that's one of the most important things we can be doing. So we're doing that, and we're spending a lot of money on that. I think it's very important.
He's talking about just say no ads. This is his entire approach to drug addiction in this country. It has absolutely nothing to do with big pharma actually lying to doctors or to, a patients or any. No, and there should be absolutely no punishment for them getting, a good chunk of this country super addicted to oxycodone and all of its related, heroin-based products. I mean, it's just so unbelievable. Okay, so what happened today at the court? So the court was literally looking at a clause, and this is becoming a very popular clause. It's sort of like in my day, we had these non-competes. They finally just said, those are illegal. They're keeping people from working. Well, there's this new clause that's ending up in settlement agreements with giant corporate America who does harm to ordinary people. And the clause actually says things like, you're shielded from liability even though your company did these really bad things. You, who owns the company, could never be sued going forward personally. Now, it's this deal took how many years to negotiate? 20. Okay, 20 years. And it would have required the Sacklers to pay $6 billion over 18 years with $4.5 billion due in the first 9 years. And the Supreme Court today, and this is the weirdest decision ever, okay? And all it's going to cause is more delay. The Supreme Court said, we think, the majority said it was 5-4, by the way, and it had very odd bedfellows, Justice Kavanaugh and Sotomayor, they were on one side of this decision, and on the other side of the decision was Clarence Thomas and Ketanji Brown Jackson. So very weird, okay? But what it actually did was it said, you can't shield individuals from future civil suits under bankruptcy law that they're not a party to, because individuals are not parties to corporate bankruptcy filings. The reason why you start a corporation is to shield yourself from certain liabilities. And then when your company goes bankrupt and you're taking your company into bankruptcy to pay off civil penalties, that doesn't shield you as a person from being sued in the future. And so the Supreme Court ruled that way, and guess what now has to happen? Start all over again, swear to God. All of the people and all of the states and all of the harmed individuals and all of the tribes, it was tribes too, among others, are all going to have to now wait even longer for the money that they're owed, because Purdue was found guilty, criminally guilty, and civilly fined also to the tune, and they entered into a civil agreement to pay $6 billion to states, individuals, tribes, etc. Okay? And now the Supreme Court says, the clause, it's like a poison pill, swear to God. And very high-priced lawyers are, they're very good at this. They figure out ways to, put stumbling blocks in the way of things closing. And so now this can't go forward. Just an example of what this court did. It was, it wasn't a decision either way. It wasn't, they just said, go start all over again. Take the clause out and start all over again. It took 20 years to get to this point. That's what people just don't get. Well, and if you wanted to be very kind about it, you could say 10 years, right? Because the claims started in 2007, true enough. The criminal plea deals from the top executives came around 2014, 7 years later. So let's just say the clock started ticking for the civil cases in 2014. Okay, let's just say that. So 10 years. Go back to square one, start all over again. That's one of the cases, okay? The other cases have a lot to do with the administrative state, which, of course, they call, Bannon and all those, idiots, called the deep state. They're not the deep state. They're the part of the government that employs about 2 million people who have expertise in various areas, like food and drugs and administration of food and drugs, like securities and exchange, like EPA, environmental protection, consumer protection, things like that. Well, they want to get rid of it. And at the very beginning of any Trump administration, the very first thing they would like to do is fire all those civil servants who bring an enormous amount of expertise in those particular arenas, in those particular commissions, agencies, to the table. So people know what they're talking about when they're talking about pollution, or they know what they're talking about when they're talking about clean water, or they know what they're talking about when they're talking about securities and exchange fraud, right? All to protect us from the elite, the well-moneyed, well-lawyered elite. Case in point, Sackler family. Just one example, okay? All the other cases have to do with the Food and Drug Administration and the mifepristone case. Well, kick the can down the road. Well, we won't decide it. We'll just say those doctors that brought this case, they had no standing. They weren't harmed. So, we're not going to decide whether or not mifepristone is, rightfully on the market for the last 20 years. And we're not going to destroy the Food and Drug Administration yet. We're going to wait. We're going to wait to see who the next president is, you see. And the Securities and Exchange Commission, which oversees fraudulent securities, okay, and fraudulent activity in the marketplace, meaning, you set up a hedge fund, okay, and your hedge fund, it does something really cheesy or wicked or questionable, right? Under our laws. It's actually paying people who invested with you off of new money that you're getting from new investors instead of paying you what your investment earned. That's called a Ponzi scheme. Securities and Exchange Commission would oversee something like that. Now, in this case today that we had with the Securities and Exchange Commission, this is the case of a right-wing hedge fund manager who's also a talk show host. Swear to God. And he's running a hedge fund. And his hedge fund is, it's janky, okay? It's hinky. His hedge fund is overvaluing the assets that are in the hedge fund. And by overvaluing the assets, he can charge you more to manage them. We only do well when our clients do well, like that kind of a thing. So he overvalued his assets so that he could charge his investors more to manage those assets. And he got caught doing it. They just ruled that the Securities and Exchange Commission isn't entitled anymore to level civil fines against that kind of bad behavior in the securities marketplace. No, that he now has to you take him all the way to federal court, and 10 years from now we'll get back to the Supreme Court and they'll rule again about whatever. But the Securities and Exchange Commission can't level fines, civil fines, against people who violate the securities and exchange rules.
Call in, connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844.
561-270-3844. George Jarvis is a right-wing activist and political commentator who is also a hedge fund manager. He got in trouble with the Securities and Exchange Commission for fraud. The SEC found that he misrepresented how his funds were run, that he paid himself and his partner excessive fees, that he inflated his assets' value. The SEC responded in a very standard way, fining him and prohibiting him from certain kinds of investment work. Jarvis contested the SEC's ruling, but he didn't stop there. He argued that the SEC's entire regulatory process, including the role of administrative law judges, was unconstitutional. SEC versus Jarvis and the other two cases taken up by the Supreme Court take aim at the powers of the so-called administrative state and at the very functioning of our government.
Yes, and that's what all of these cases seem to have in common, and I sort of kind of told you that, and that the very big one, the giant kahuna, the one that everybody isn't talking about but needs to, is not going to be decided today, probably not tomorrow, because usually the Chief Justice gives you 24 hours notice when he's going to release an opinion, and he didn't say that he was. So we don't think tomorrow will be the day. But there's a case that I keep on trying to get you to look at, okay? And if you don't like unraveling Supreme Court cases this early in the day, like before cocktails, then it all comes down to one thing: vote Biden. But the big kahuna, the giant fish, the Moby Dick of all of these attacks on the administrative state, the deep state, if you will, if you must, if you may, is this Chevron deference case, okay? And that will probably get next week, well into July. And that case, oh my God, that case, check this out. Deference paid to the case of Chevron versus the Climate Defense Fund. I forget what you know what I'm talking, the National Defense Air Climate Defense Fund. Anyway, that case is 40 years old. That case is 40 years old. That case is the basis of 18,000 opinions. Talk about stare decisis. Talk about precedent, okay? Deferring to the Chevron case, which says that administrative agencies have expertise. And when Congress wasn't clear when they wrote a statute about this or that, then you could defer to the agency with the expertise in that particular area, okay? And so it's the natural, I can't say it because I always say NRDC, but it's the Natural Resources Defense Council, NRDC. Okay. So that case 40 years ago held that if Congress was not completely crystal clear in its writing of a piece of legislation, then you could defer to the agency's best judgment because they had expertise in, oil cleanups, or they had expertise in shipping, or they had, expertise in clean air, or they had expertise in clean water, or they had expertise in securities, or they had expertise in banking or food or drugs, right? Well, this is what Republicans are trying to get rid of. When we talk about regulations, this is exactly where they focus, like laser beams. And this entire court session was about destroying the SEC with this case here that we just went over. This guy who was, overcharging. I mean, it was such an obvious fraud. He was just, charging more to manage people's assets by overvaluing the amount of assets he had under management. It's just that simple. And they fined him and they banned him from doing certain, certain trades, right? I mean, that's kind of what the SEC does. And they don't have a lot of power. The Federal Election Commission, okay, they have no power pretty much. They've been defanged by the moneyed elite who want to take foreign money, who want to take money from all over the place, who want to take money in larger and larger clumps, okay? Now they're going after the Food and Drug Administration with the mifepristone, but they kicked the can down the road because they said, these doctors weren't really harmed. So we'll reserve this questioning of the Food and Drug Administration for a later date, a better case. They did the same thing here with. They're going to do the same thing, not with Chevron specifically, okay, but they did it with the EPA. Okay, so here's a very simple little thing. This is another one they just decided, but they didn't decide. They didn't decide this one either. They put this one on hold too. All of them. Why did they take these cases? Why? It's just unimaginable that they wasted all of our time and money listening to these cases and all of them, like 20-something. It was like a really long docket this year, and decided like none of them. It was just to delay everything. Everything is on delay, pending the next election. So this EPA one, this was a real simple one to understand. The EPA has a, what do they call it? A good neighbor air pollution policy, okay, where if you're upstream from me, okay, and you're polluting, then you have some obligation to me to moderate the amount of ozone you're pumping into the air, okay? And so the EPA decided that they were going to tell 23 different states that this good neighbor policy applied to them and that they should come up with their own solutions, their own plans to be good neighbors to states that are downwind from them. So this applied to states like, mining states like West Virginia and Ohio and Indiana, okay, fracking states like that. And that they had an obligation to come up with a plan to make sure that they weren't tainting water downstream or air downstream, okay? And guess what? They didn't do it. They didn't come up with their plan. They just sat there and delayed and said nothing about, any ideas that they had. And this was specifically air pollution. So the EPA made a plan. And now they have to defer to the EPA's plan because they refuse to participate in their own plan, designing it, let alone implementing it. They didn't even bother to design one. So to take authority away from the EPA, the Supreme Court blocked any plans that the EPA came up with and put it all on hold and said, you know what, let the states have another crack at it. Let them have another, 10, 20 years. And they kicked the can down the road. That was a 5-4 decision. Now, what's really interesting is Amy Coney Barrett sided with the liberals, saying, no, this is ridiculous. They had all this time to come up with a plan, and they didn't come up with a plan. So now the EPA comes up with a totally workable, doable plan, and they don't want to follow that plan. So now they're here. No. Anyway, 5-4, they put it on hold. Put it on hold. Everything was left unresolved. Even the Idaho abortion case that we went over yesterday, okay, that's unresolved as well. And so, God help you if you're in any of the, 14 states that have total abortion bans. If you show up at the emergency room, the federal law, EMTALA, that is required, it makes it totally required that doctors tend to you and get you out of, extreme agony or danger. No, you can die right there.
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
Today, the so-called administrative state, this is what is used derogatorily, is a huge piece of our federal governing system. Under the executive branch, there are 15 departments: Department of State, Treasury, Interior, Education, Agriculture, Justice, Commerce. They go on. And within those departments, there are more than 400 agencies and sub-agencies that employ 2 million Americans. Now, these agencies, among other functions, are the regulatory bodies upon which we rely in nearly every aspect of our daily lives. Yep. Experts at the EPA regulate pollutants. The Department of Transportation comes up with safety standards for cars and highways. Agriculture makes sure our food is safe. FDA determines the drugs we consume. OSHA and the Department of Labor keep workers safe. They protect their rights. This big, complex nation has big, complex systems to keep it running. But for decades, even before Reagan gave that speech, there have been debates about the size of government and the democratic nature of accountability, often in conservative circles. In 2018, as Trump had already appointed an historic number of federal judges, including his first Supreme Court pick, Neil Gorsuch, who had a long history of opposing federal regulations. The White House counsel, Don McGahn, said in plain terms exactly what the Trump administration was going to do. Quote, there is a coherent plan here where actually the judicial selection and the deregulatory effect are really the flip side of the same coin.
Effort.
With courts stacked with Trump appointees across the country, the coherent plan was well underway. The Supreme Court has taken up 3 major cases this term that take aim at the very structure of the so-called administrative state and at the constitutionality of how they function. These cases on their own, but especially together, will call into question the function of our government as we know it.
That's exactly right. Okay. And that is Project 2025 in a nutshell. Project 2025 aims to replace those 2 million people that work at these 15 agencies and their sub-agencies who carry with them to their jobs every single day some expertise about clean air, about food, about drugs, about commerce, about securities, about, hospitals and workplace safety, all of these people that, put their heads down every day at their desk and try to come up with, a structurally sound ways to enforce what Congress wrote in our laws, is exactly where Donald Trump and Steve Bannon, want to concentrate all their efforts. They would like to dismantle what we have now, which isn't perfect, far from it, and replace it with Trump loyalists. People who will say yes or no to mifepristone, depending on what Donald Trump wants them to say, not whether or not it's safe and efficacious. Okay? Not anything like that. That air pollution isn't a thing, and just destroy the EPA and the ability to even ask states to make a plan to, reduce the amount of ozone they're pumping out into the air to protect their neighbors from having air pollution, which causes asthma and premature death and all COPD and all kinds of, pulmonary situations, right? So this particular Supreme Court session it's not over. We don't have all the decisions yet. Obviously, everybody wants to hear the presidential immunity one, but I'm pretty clear on splitting the baby on that one. I'm really pretty clear about they're going to send that back down to the lower court because they've made no decisions here. Like none. They wasted everybody's time, everybody's money, everybody's effort, everybody's arguments, everybody's work that they poured into making a case to the Supreme Court, all wasted. Wasted on this court. Why? Because they're waiting for the next election. That's what they're waiting for. But this was all designed to attack the SEC. The case of this man who was a right-wing activist and also a hedge fund manager and a talk show host, okay? No, he has to go to a jury trial. The SEC doesn't have any particular administrative law judges that are good enough to hold him accountable. Now, I just want you to know that the SEC has returned to people who were wronged in the Securities and Exchange arena just in 2023 alone, $5 billion. So I think it benefits people who want to invest against, hucksters and con men. It's a good thing, right? Yeah. And all they're doing is enforcing the laws that Congress passed. And if there's any ambiguity between what the law Congress passed is and what the agency thinks it is, then you defer to the agency because they have expertise. End of story. Congress, the Supreme Court is sitting there going, I don't know, you should kick it all back to Congress and let them clear it up. I mean, in these 1,892 pages, there's a little ambiguity about enforcement. Really? It's so ridiculous. And like I said, the giant one, the really big one, if they throw out the Chevron deference, the Chevron doctrine has been in place since 1984. Okay. And so when I want to see, what's being planned in advance, like where the Supreme Court's going to land, you can't always know, but what you can do is you can go to the really big law firms like Holland and Knight, what's his name? Greenberg Traurig, like the really, really big law firms that very wealthy people go to, that employ not just lawyers, but lobbyists on the topic that's near and dear to your heart that you can hire to influence Congress when they're writing these pieces of legislation on the front end. And then on the back end, you hire the lawyers inside that same law firm to fight whatever decision the agency made against you. See, it's a rigged game. I mean, there's just no question about it, but it's the best one we have. Unless we take the money out of politics, right? So what I do is I go to Holland and Knight's website or I go to Greenberg Traurig and I see what they're writing down about what the Supreme Court is taking up and what they're telling their clients to prepare for, or what their clients need to, realize how this could go, all the different ways this can go. And that's what informs me, and then I try to inform you. And I'm telling you right now, Holland and Knight's website, their law, that's a humongous law firm. I mean, there's like if you're guilty, you go to Holland and Knight. You know what I mean? Like they can get you out of it. So, but for 40 years, they're even writing on their website. I'm going to just read it to you. For nearly 40 years and in more than 18,000 judicial opinions, federal courts have used the Chevron doctrine to defer to an agency's reasonable interpretation of an ambiguous statute. Okay? And so what this case takes up is the entire administrative apparatus and whether or not the people in any of these agencies are to be deferred to if there's any ambiguity in the law. Now, for 40 years and in 18,000 court opinions, the answer has been yes. These agencies have an amazing amount of people with a very long resume of expertise in their particular arenas. There's a two-pronged test that is applied to discern whether or not the agency is making the right call. The first prong of it is the court has to look at whether Congress has directly spoken to the precise question at issue. And if the intent of Congress is discernible, meaning knowable, that's the answer to the question. Like, that's the answer to whether or not, you can hold somebody accountable for this behavior or that. If you can discern the intent by this piece of legislation Congress wrote, then that's the intent. If it's somewhat ambiguous, if the court determines, and it's not just, it's a court. If the court determines that Congress has not directly addressed the precise question at issue, then the court cannot impose its own interpretation of the statute. The court defers to the agency with the expertise in the area, in the arena, in the subject matter. This is flipping that on its head and saying the agency sucks, let the court decide. Now, you see what happens when the court decides that it's a medical expert, right? And they say, mifepristone, we don't know. Is it efficacious? We're going to insert ourselves and we're going to say we have medical expertise. You see what happens there. But that is what this Chevron doctrine case is all about. It's about taking power away from the people who work very hard in these agencies and have expertise in these particular food and drugs. That would be doctors. That would be people who understand bacteria. That would be people who understand meat. That would be people who understand salmonella. You know what I'm saying? No, let Kavanaugh decide. What world do you want to live in? I don't want to live in a world where Kavanaugh and Gorsuch and Clarence Thomas, who get greased, decide whether or not the meat is tainted. I would like the Food and Drug Administration to decide if the meat is tainted after they inspect the freaking factory and recall the product.
Mary had a little lamb.
We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe it.
Help is on the way.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
If we go behind the podiums, you can see two green lights. When they're on, they signal to the candidate his microphone is on. When the green lights are off, they signal to the candidate his microphone is off. Now I want to give you a sense of what it will look like for viewers at home if a candidate whose microphone is off interrupts a candidate whose microphone is on. So I'm standing at one podium, and I'll ask Phil to come in and take the other podium. And so let's say I'm answering a question. My light is green, and I'm speaking. Phil's microphone is off, and his green lights are not illuminated. He's going to interrupt me as I'm speaking, and this is what it will sound like. My volume remains constant, while Phil's interruption can be difficult to understand.
Let's try the opposite. My microphone is now
Why?
on.
Why do we have to try the opposite?
Is off, and he's going to interrupt me. My volume remains constant, while Victor's interruption can be difficult to understand.
Are we really
We
this
should
dumb?
note, by agreeing to participate in this debate, both campaigns and candidates have also agreed to abide by these rules.
Are we really that stupid? I mean, we have to actually explain to people that when your mic is on, you could hear me, and when my mic is off? I mean, Really? Do we have to we have to go there? Wow. I'm stunned. I have to say I'm stunned. I mean, like I said, I don't expect everybody to be able to digest like this whole raft of decisions that have come from the Supreme Court that really are non-decisions. But, you know, like I said, it's all going to come down to the same thing. Vote Biden. Vote Biden. Because the shock troops, the Bannons of the world, the Stephen Millers of the world, the deportation forces. I mean, you know, it's like so insane. It's so crazy. And, you know, Donald Trump would not even have the immigration issue tonight. He wouldn't even have it. He wouldn't be able to be all racist and assholey about it. If, you know, he didn't call every single senator and every single House member, 300 House members would have voted for this bipartisan legislation that passed the Senate that would have increased the burden to claim asylum, would have increased the number of detention beds available so that people would not be released into the interior. They would be held in detention until a judge could come and hear their asylum claim. We would have incentivized the hiring of more and more and more judges to hear those asylum claims, to adjudicate them swiftly and efficiently, and to deport people back to their countries after their asylum claims were denied. But no, Donald Trump said, no, I want the issue. I don't want to solve a problem. I want the problem. And so that particular piece of legislation died. And I want you to know that. And I wish I could talk to a larger audience. I really do. I really, really wish that, you know, like we had the numbers that Walter Cronkite got. Nobody does because everybody's siloed now, right? But it would be great if we only had like 3 networks for just a minute, for just a moment, where Walter Cronkite and you know, Tom Brokaw or whatever, they were the people that every American watched at night, and we all got the same facts at night for a half hour of our day. And we were all oriented around the lay of the land, the facts of the case. And then we could decide what to do about it. We don't even have that luxury anymore. People don't know that the only reason why the border is up for talking tonight, that the border and Donald Trump's claims about walls and deportation forces and camps and everything else are needed, but they're not, because Donald Trump defeated a bipartisan border security package that was negotiated by one of the most conservative senators, Lankford from Oklahoma, okay? Along with Kyrsten Sinema from the middle of the aisle, and Murphy from Connecticut, okay? I mean, it was such a bipartisan effort. It even had the Kyrsten Sinema got so frustrated with it that she's not going to run again. She doesn't think that she can be effective. She doesn't think she can get anything done. It's just so bizarre. And all they want to do is talk about it tonight. That's all they're going to want to do, is talk about it instead of doing something about it. Now, Biden did do something about it. That legislation, he would have signed it in a heartbeat. But we don't have that legislation. You know, I just want to play a very short little piece here. This is really, really short. But this sums up, you know, exactly what we're going to be looking at tonight, right? So this is Governor Tim Walz. Remember, Governor Tim Walz was trying, during COVID, he was begging other states to send him ventilators. And he was begging the Trump administration to help him get ventilators. And they introduced him yesterday and said, you know, well, what do you think? You know, who would you be voting for?
I just hope he, you know, and I'm sure he won't, just don't engage with the buffoonery that Donald Trump wants to be in. We know these debates are not real life. I've been governor long enough. I served under both, with President Trump and President Biden. And with President Trump, it was always, you know, fighting with my neighbors to get ventilators during COVID and telling my citizens to drink bleach. With Joe Biden, it's about real solutions. So I just think be himself, give us a positive vision for America, one that impacts our families, and just don't get caught up in the grievance stuff that Donald Trump will bring.
He will. Donald Trump will bring grievance stuff, and he will bring how he's being persecuted by Biden's Justice Department, and that we are being invaded, and all of these imaginary fantasy worlds that he thinks America is living in. You know, it is sad when you hear a horrible story about, you know, a person being hurt or killed or worse. by a person who is here undocumented, or by a person who is here because they slid on in, you know? There's something really, really horrible about that, right? But most immigrants, most migrants don't commit crime. You want to look at rapists in this country or serial killers, you're going to have to look at white men. I'm sorry, but that's where you're going to have to look. But we don't sit here and denigrate white men because white men tend to be the rapier of everybody. We don't sit here and denigrate white men because white men are serial killers more often than any other demographic. Because that would be a waste of time. It wouldn't solve any real crime problems. But see, this is what Fox News does all day. This is what they do all day. And they leave out the part where a bipartisan border package was offered, voted on, passed the Senate, and died in the House because Mike Johnson was told by Donald Trump not to introduce it. Well, actually, that's not true. They didn't even debate it in the Senate. I don't know why I said that. I'm sorry. I take it back. Yeah, there wasn't even a debate in the Senate. He couldn't even get past it. Okay, but I mean, it's just so sad. It's so sad. And they're not going to be happy until we look like Bolivia. Did you see what happened in Bolivia yesterday? I mean, this was just bizarre. It was just the strangest thing. So in Bolivia, the president of Bolivia, and now there's a rumor swirling that the president of Bolivia made this happen to himself. Okay, he had himself attacked. What happened in Bolivia yesterday was the leader of the military, okay, like the Secretary of Defense, okay, or the Joint Chiefs, however you like to think of it, was fired by the president of Bolivia. And he decided that the Joint Chiefs or the Secretary of Defense, he decided he was going to use the military to get revenge on the president that fired him. And so the military actually entered the presidential palace in Bolivia in a coup attempt, a bloody military coup event. Well, 5 minutes after this thing started, the general was arrested and thrown in a car and taken away. And I'm sure Steve Bannon, who, shouldn't he be in jail by now? Oh, right, he has till next week. Go walk in the grass, Steve, because it's going to be a while before you can put your bare feet in any kind of natural surface. But they would love to see us look like that. They would love to see us look like Bolivia. They would love to see us look like, you know, if President Trump doesn't like what you're doing, jail. If President Trump thinks that, you know, you burned your fish, jail. Undercooked your chicken, jail.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
General Zuniga being arrested. Watch this.
Del regimiento de Achacacho. ¿Ya? Achacacho. Entonces, más. No. Así más.
Usted está detenido. Usted está detenido, mi general. La general no.
And there he goes. Bye-bye. That was more peaceful than January 6th, right? And that was after a military coup attempt by that man. Okay? I mean, they're not going to be happy until, you know, this is like normal.
You're stealing, right to jail. You're playing music too loud, right to jail, right away. You're driving too fast, jail. Slow, jail. You're charging too high prices for sweaters, glasses. You right to jail. You undercook fish, believe it or not, jail. You overcook chicken, also jail. Undercook, overcook. You make an appointment with the dentist and you don't show up, believe it or not, jail, right away. We have the best patients in the world because of jail.
God, I love Fred Armisen. I mean, that's the goal. That's what, you know, Trump has in mind. That is kind of, you know, he wants to be, you know, Il Duce. It's just like so sad. So sad. I know they saw. I know that Donald Trump saw what's going on in Bolivia last night. I know that they saw Kenya too. You know, Kenya is an interesting thing. I don't know if anybody talked to you about it, but in a nutshell, I could tell you why Kenya's president actually backed off of his ridiculous tax plan that was peeving the people of Kenya so bad, right? So maybe you saw it, maybe you didn't, I don't know. But in Kenya, you have President Ruto, who was invited here just a week and a half ago. It was really amazing. We had a whole state dinner, and President Ruto and Barack Obama came and just, kind of dipped a toe in, said hello, and left. He didn't stay for the dinner, and it was very interesting to me because, his dad and his half-sister still, they're from Kenya, Anyway, so all of a sudden, the president comes back from America in Kenya, and he says, I have a new tax plan for the people of Kenya. We're going to raise taxes by 2% on earnings and 10% on this and 5% on that. And the people were like, no. And it got real ugly in Kenya real fast, like violent, like crazy bad, like 20 people died. And Ruto had called out his henchmen. He had called out his armed guard, right? And started shooting first tear gas and then live rounds into the crowds. Not good. And then all of a sudden, Ruto gets on the TV and he says, okay, I hear you. I'm not going to raise the taxes. How'd that happen? Well, I think it might have had something to do with the fact that we had a state dinner for Ruto, invited him over here and said, hey, listen, there's a really huge problem in Haiti with keeping the peace. Okay, there's no government. There are gangs roving the street there. And if America puts, boots on the ground, it's going to be bad. It's going to be really bad. It's going to be really, really seen through the lens of imperialism and conquering. And that is not the reason why we want to bring some sort of order to Haiti. We want people to be able to move around that country freely. We want them to be able to, have food. And Haiti is the way it is because they killed their president. Haiti literally assassinated their president. And that's when the gangs took over. Okay, so we gave Kenya the role of being peacekeepers in Haiti and gave them a big wad of cash to finance it so that they could go and do some good in the world in Haiti. And I'm pretty sure that once the riots got ugly and people were showing up dead on the sidewalks, that the president of the United States called the president of Kenya and said, I really do think that if you rescinded your tax plan, a lot of your problems would go away. And you know what? If you don't, all that money that we were going to give you to go and do some good in the world in Haiti, that all goes away too. Can't kill your own people. Just can't have it. I can't do it. Can't have it. Can't have it. And all of a sudden it stopped. Isn't that something? Or you could be, Trump. The hostages will remain hostages until I say they're not hostages anymore because Vladimir Putin likes me. What? You're going to extort the hostages now? They're the most vulnerable people on the planet. You got a ballerina over there. A ballerina who gave $50 to Ukraine's, fund to feed people in Ukraine after Russia's invasion. She's being held in Russia, okay? You got Gershkovich, who is a Wall Street Journal reporter. His trial started yesterday. And Trump's position on any of this is they will remain hostages until I'm president. And then I can get them out. And you know what the price for that would be? Right, Ukraine is what the price would be. So, there are smart people and there are not smart people. Now, if you're going to ask me for the 80,000th time what I think is going to happen tonight, I have no earthly idea because, unless it happens, then it isn't something that happened. It's just, my basic philosophy of reality. When it happens, it's real, is what it is. But I will say that Donald Trump doesn't know anything. Donald Trump doesn't know policy. Donald Trump doesn't understand how a bill becomes a law. Donald Trump probably doesn't even know where Melania is right now, okay? He doesn't know anything. Donald Trump is a moron. You understand? He only knows how to cheat, and he only knows how to delay the inevitable. That is what he's learned in all his years on this planet. Nothing more. He has never learned how to be decent. The art of the deal. He's going to complain. Check this out. He's going to complain that this debate is rigged against him. Nobody made him go to this debate. He's not under subpoena. He's not under, this is the one place where there is no indictment, okay? This is the one place where he's not been convicted of felonies. He doesn't have to show up tonight. But he negotiated with CNN, who he says is fake news, but he wants to be on the TV more than he wants to say that they're not a real news network. And so he agreed to all their freaking terms. He agreed to be on a stage with no audience, even though he feeds off of the audience. He feeds off of their cheers. He feeds off of their USA, USA, lock her up. He feeds off of that crap, okay? And that won't be there for him tonight. And his mic is going to get shut off as he tries to overtalk Joe Biden. The reason why that decision was negotiated with him is because in the first debate that Mike Wallace hosted or moderated between Biden and Trump, Donald Trump interrupted Joe Biden 145 times. And that's the truth. 145 times. And Donald Trump lost 4 points in the polling because people didn't like it. They saw him as a bully. They saw him as nasty and very unpresidential. And he never caught up. He lost 4 points to Joe Biden that night and never caught up. This is the election he swears was stolen. He lost it. And he probably lost it in that very first debate.
Clear. Call in, connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
He is walking in to a trap. He is walking into a rigged debate. He is walking into an arena filled with people that want to murder him. He's going to stand 10 feet away from Joe Biden, who wants to put him in prison the rest of his life, wants him to die and rot in prison, and Joe Biden wants to put the rest of his family in prison. That's who he has to stand next to when he has to debate. He's got to be questioned by Jake Tapper that called him a terrorist, called him a Nazi, called him every name in the book.
No.
And then Dana Bash, that little piece of whose husband is one of the 51 spies who lied. What? That is what President Trump is walking into. And it disgusts me. It infuriates me. I can't believe our country has come to this. Our politics are horrific. This is why a lot of people like me don't even want to vote anymore.
Oh, please don't. Does anybody remember, first of all, what the F is wrong with her? Okay. That three-toed monster, really, she is a monster. She lives in a fantasy land. She thinks Jewish space laser, any conspiracy that comes down the pike, that girl will jump on board, okay? It's just a very strange thing that she's got going on in that head of hers, okay? What do they call it? Bad butch body? What was her?
Bad-built butch beach.
Bad-built butch body.
Yeah, bad-built
That's
butch
her.
body, yeah.
I mean, come on now. But let's remember who actually almost died at the last debate. Talking about murder. Okay, so it was Chris Christie was prepping Donald Trump for the debate against Joe Biden during the COVID era. Remember that? And Donald Trump had COVID. He had the COVID. And he went out on the stage with the COVID, and he stood 8 feet away from Joe Biden with the COVID. Well, luckily, Joe Biden had been vaccinated by then, didn't get the COVID. I mean, he could have gotten the COVID, but he wouldn't have died from the COVID, I guess. I don't know. But Chris Christie, on the other hand, got the COVID. Chris Christie ended up in the hospital. Chris Christie almost died. Donald Trump almost murdered Chris Christie in the last debate between Trump and Biden. So if I were her, I would check my conspiracy theories and make sure I got the right murderer in my cast of characters. You know who else Donald Trump murdered? Herman Cain. Herman Cain died of COVID at one of Trump's rallies, and the entire community, the CDC and the virologists of the world and the Debbie Burks and all don't have that rally. Don't do it. Don't have an indoor rally. Don't do it. They did it, and Herman Cain got the COVID, and Herman Cain freaking died. And then they had their rose garden ceremony for Amy Coney Barrett, who they put on the Supreme Court 5 minutes before the election. Remember that? And she got the COVID. So I don't know if she has her murder scenario down pat. I don't know. It's I don't know if she understands who's trying to kill who. I think it's exactly backwards from the thing that she thinks is happening. I just do. But the nerve of her to sit on the soon-to-be, a jailbird show. Like, why is his show is still on? He's still doing this ridiculous, victory or death thing. And he's got to turn himself into the freaking prison. A prison. Not talking county jail here. Good God, man. What a bunch of just disgusting, ugly, heinous, nasty, cheating, fraudulent people asking you to make them president. Holy crap. Really? Michelle in L.A.
Hi, I was calling about the Chevron deference.
Okay.
It's not just the normal things that you think it is. It could also blow up our tax code.
How?
Because when Congress passes laws, and they're not accountants, they often don't interpret them correctly. So the IRS then has a period where they look at it, then they have a comment period, and then they make a ruling on how they are going to interpret the law. So they are interpreting how the tax law has to be implemented.
Yes, according to Congress, according to the statute. I mean, the tax code is, it has loopholes in it, but those are obvious. I mean,
right, but there's things
stated.
that but there's interpretations that are not exact, or sometimes, like when they passing next, say, a Build Back Better or something else, they make up the rules on how they want those things interpreted. So they have a lot of leeway.
So again, it would be one of those things where if you could determine the intent of Congress, then the intent of Congress would have to, rule the day. If Congress for some reason is ambiguous about the tax code, I'd be surprised. But if there's some ambiguousness about the tax code, then you would defer to the interpretation by the IRS. But I don't see that as a thing.
Yeah, well, I guess, since I'm a tax professional, I kind of go into the weeds a little more. Tell
me, when is the last time that the IRS made a decision about any of your clients over what the statute says?
It's not on particular clients. It's how they're going to interpret what the regulations and rules that have been passed.
Which one? I mean, what are we talking about? I don't think that there's regulations in the tax code. I think there's, the tax code. It says, you can carry interest, or you can, depreciate this asset, but you can't depreciate that asset. I mean, I think they're pretty specific because the tax code is how many pages?
Well, yeah, and sometimes things are very generalized, and so they make decisions on what they're going to include and how they're going to interpret the language that is in in the regulations. I mean, in the laws.
I don't know. I mean, Howard was a lobbyist on the tax code for years and years. It's pretty specific if you would ask me. But okay, you think that it's up for interpretation? Okay.
Yeah, there are some things that are up for interpretation, which means it would take
like
that
what?
power away.
That's what I'm asking.
I'm not in front of something to look up specifics right now. I'm sorry. I just
you said you were in it deep, so I'm asking you.
Right,
I'm
I just know
to your expertise.
I know. I'm from reading a lot of. I get. Every day I get things from the IRS I'm on all the different mailing email mail things where they have a number of different things that they're constantly, almost every day, giving you things. So I would have to go back and research to come up with
because what I'm saying is I doubt that there's an ambiguity in the tax code as much as there's ambiguity in let's say the Securities and Exchange Commission.
Right. It's not the same level, but it could still have a bearing on it.
But you said it would blow up the tax code. That's what you said.
Well, it could on parts of it, yes. It could definitely, if they're interpreting things a certain way. That's part of the thing when you go in, and even if you get an audit, you could sit there and bring up what you think the interpretation should be when somebody's in an audit.
I don't know. I doubt it, but I don't know. I don't know. And she doesn't know. And that's the interesting part. However, nothing got decided. That's the point, okay? Everything was delayed. Every single thing is delayed. And when it comes to blowing up the administrative agencies inside of, the federal government, that is what the Republicans want to do. They want total chaos. Total chaos. But somehow I just don't know about the tax code and business. I don't know.
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
So now she has me all worried and going crazy that there's something with the tax code that could be blown up. And so now I'm looking about what is in the tax code that could be blown up. Maybe enforcement of the tax code. I don't know. But this is now driving me crazy. Please, if you're going to make an accusation like that huge, that big, and you say you have expertise in the area, I have no reason to doubt you. Tell me what it is. Tell us all, because we want to know. Cindy in Florida.
Yeah. Hi.
Cindy in Florida.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Oh.
Hi.
Okay.
I'm still here.
I'm here.
Okay. Hi. Okay. I have two things. Can I have two things? Right. Can I ask about two things?
What do you need?
All right. First of all, I'd like to mention. Okay. Wait a minute. I hear me.
Brother David.
What was that?
That's
She had her TV or radio on in the background while trying to talk.
Yes, but these last two, this is why the phones are just like so, I don't know. I just don't like them anymore. I just, you know who's not going to take phone calls? David Pakman has actually said that not only I have to hear everything that's going on Free Speech TV from my audience, right? So I heard that he's leaving Free Speech TV, and I also heard that he's not going to take phone calls anymore. And the reason, he says, is because you have to go through so many of them to get to a real decent content, to get to a real decent call. He thinks it's a waste of his time, so he's not going to be doing that.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, that's telling. Well, sister, I'm calling because I have to work tomorrow, and also I wanted to call in advance of tonight's appetite suppressant. And in my ongoing memorization of On Tyranny, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century by Timothy Snyder, I had to get a new copy because the old one was dog-eared. And this just popped open today. Number 2.
Why didn't you tell me? You know how many copies of that thing I have? Probably 10. Yeah, because I give them out. I used to give out pocket constitutions. Now I give out On Tyranny.
That's what I give people on their birthdays. You bet.
Yeah.
Number 2, defend institutions. It is institutions that help us to preserve decency. They need our help as well. Do not speak of our institutions unless you make them yours by acting on their behalf. Institutions do not protect themselves. They fall one after the other unless each is defended from the beginning. So choose an institution you care about.
You're fading in and out.
So choose an institution you care about, a court, a newspaper, a law, a labor union, and take its side. The institution we have to defend in November is this country.
Well, listen, this is the thing. When I was going through all of these Supreme Court issues that have been raised and left undecided, right? Yeah. Just hanging out there. And, poor women in this country, of childbearing years, God help you. Being pregnant in this country now is just such a risk. It's a risk to life and limb, man. And depending on where you live, the attention and the care that you can now get before the doctor looks at you and says, there's nothing we can do. What do you mean there's nothing? Don't you want? No, we're not allowed. I will go to jail for 5 years. It's an amazing thing. Women are they are hemorrhaging and bleeding and all this stuff. So
even as we speak, literally. Yeah.
So the institution that obviously matters in this election, as in so many others, is the Supreme Court.
Thank you.
And I mean, honestly, everybody is now starting to say exactly what we've been trying to explain, and that is that if the Supreme Court comes under the thumb of Donald, okay, then all bets are off, number one. And number two, he might like the idea that we have for expanding the court, and he might like the idea of having 13 justices, which is what we're due, okay? And put on, like a Mercedes over there, a little, Aileen Mercedes Cannon, who's like, what, 43 years old, and she could, for the next 40 years, tell you can't you can't get medical attention in this country if you're a pregnant being? Really?
Precisely. That's why elections
That's
matter.
the institution that matters right now.
Absolutely. Still more of us, sister.
I hope so.
Gorgeous girdles for everyone.
And not just a few. So, I mean, honestly, everything is hanging. The reason why we're having this kind of court, the reason why we're having a discussion about whether or not there is tax expertise in the IRS that should be deferred to if there's any ambiguity in the law or any ambiguity in how, what the guidance is, or any ambiguity in the enforcement or the collection, anything at all, which I'm not sure that there is. But let's just say that there was, right? Let's just say that there was. And that man has control over the IRS and decides he doesn't want, his rich friends to pay taxes anymore. Let's just say he gives them the authority or he says the IRS, you can't rely on them for tax collection anymore. How do we collect taxes now? How do we support ourselves? How do we not become Bolivia? How do we not become Kenya? I mean, how does this work? The answer is it doesn't. And what's really sad and what's really sick is Donald Trump doesn't know anything about how to solve a problem. Not anything. The idea that, well, you know what? I want you to have some facts, okay? It doesn't really matter anymore what I say. What matters is what you actually have available to you while you watch this, okay? And so the first thing I want you to know is when they start talking about the border and immigration, I want you to understand why we are in the position that we're in. Where did 48 go? I don't even see it now. I don't see it. I was going to play John Ossoff telling you why we don't have an... And number 12 is gone. That's very weird. So let's do the economy, okay? Because you need to understand that too. Here.
You have this unique experience here where you have two men who each have a record that they can try to celebrate here tonight. And you'll be hearing from President Trump, I'm sure, that inflation was lower when he was president. When he ended office, it was 1.4%. But as you know, the unemployment rate jumped to 6.7% at the end of his term. And overall jobs added was a jobs loss because of the COVID crisis. The stock market, meantime, jumped 69% when Trump was in office. You'll hear him probably talk about how he thinks things were better in his administration. But compare that with Joe Biden. After you saw a spike up to 9% in inflation, it's back down to 3.3%. The jobless rate has remained very low for a historic amount of time. Jobs added 15 million out of the COVID crash into this booming economy that we're in now. And under him, the stock market is up 43%. In fact, I really want to zero in on this because you'll remember in a previous debate that Donald Trump said if America elected Joe Biden, you would see a stock market crash. Here is the stock market under Trump. Here is the stock market under Biden. Right here, this is COVID. Right here, this is that spike in inflation, which has since begun to ease. So those are where we stand there. Now, when you talk about their records, tariffs, big corporate and individual tax cuts, and lots of deregulation for Trump. Under Biden, he's really focused on kitchen table issues, Chris, like junk fees, like antitrust, keeping companies from getting too big and taking advantage of consumers. Big legislative achievements here under infrastructure, bipartisan there, the CHIPS Act, the big investments in the environment, and student loan forgiveness. I think another issue we're really going to be zeroing in on tonight is taxes, the coming tax fight. Here is what Donald Trump wants to do. Cut the corporate tax further. Wants to extend 2017 tax cuts that could cost up to $5 trillion added to the deficit, depending on who you ask, and ending taxes on tips. That helps low-wage workers. Joe Biden really zeroing in on what he calls tax fairness, keeping tax cuts for people who make less than $400,000 a year, but raising them on the super wealthy and corporations, and really trying to plug away at what they're trying to do in this administration to help people with the cost of housing.
So you need to understand, what Donald Trump's going to crow about. You need to understand that what he's going to say about his great economy is bullcrap. You need to understand that Biden's economy is better than Trump's economy. And that the only piece of legislation that Trump passed and the only thing that he will do going forward is another tax cut for the uber wealthy, right? He wants to lower corporate taxes to 20%. I'm a small business, okay? I'm a small business, and a lot of you are too. You know what? You're paying 29%, right? But corporations, some of them pay nothing. Some of them pay 8%. Some of them pay 10%. He wants to lower the on-the-books tax code amount to 20%. He wants to extend the 2017 tax cuts, which added more to the deficit than all of Joe Biden's legislation that created 300,000 new jobs, just the one infrastructure act, right? Donald Trump added $2 trillion.